I'm not gonna lie, when I heard they were coming out with Saros, aka Returnal 2, I was so hyped to play this game that I went back and played Returnal 1, deleted my save, and started completely over. That's kind of crazy considering it took me 2 months to beat this game. However, you have to consider a few aspects about this. 007 came out and I was hyped to play that, so I put Saros on ice and came back to it afterwards. That's one thing. At the time Saros came out, I believe I was still addicted to Arc Raiders, so an expedition had just ended and a new one started, so I wanted to get all my resources back. That's two. The third and final reason why I put this game on ice is because I got burnt out playing single player games, so I went back to playing games like Street Fighter, Apex Legends, and Deadlock. All excuses aside though, I do like Saros, it is a good game, and I would recommend it to other people. However, I wouldn't hype it up as much as I did Returnal, even though some aspects of Saros are better than Returnal. For this video, I'll be going over multiple differences between Saros and Returnal, and why I believe Saros is an upgrade from Returnal, but Returnal is still a better game. It's weird, but stay tuned. The first difference is how they're telling their story. I think Saros is way easier to follow than Returnal was. Returnal, yo, I had to look up a video for that shit. There is so much I missed and I would have never thought of. This game, at some point, I got kind of confused, mainly because I stopped playing it and I came back, but it's better at telling stories than Returnal was. Another difference, and probably the most obvious difference from this game, is the shield. At first, I didn't know how I felt about it, but after playing the game, especially after beating the first boss, I was hella hyped to continue playing the game because how the shield incorporates with the combat. Initially, I started out not using the shield as much because I wasn't familiar with it, but after that first boss fight, it really forces you into using the shield and you reaping the benefits off of using the shield. Before I discuss the benefits, let's talk about power. There's a new meter in the game, it's called power, and essentially it allows you to shoot magic out of your arm. So not only does this game return with the primary and secondary fire, which changes depending on if you're holding down L2 or not, it also has a threshold on L2. If you push past it, you go into your power weapon. So to go back on my previous statement about reaping the benefits of using the shield, there are 3 different types of projectiles that enemies can shoot: blue, yellow, and red. For your shield, if you absorb blue projectiles, you gain more meter back to your power bar. This extra meter can then be used again on offense, and I like this back and forth they have with this gameplay. It keeps you on your toes, it forces you to pay attention, and it's not just jumping around trying to avoid every single projectile on the screen. To me, that's a plus. You took Returnal's gameplay and you added an extra layer to it. And the sound design around absorbing the projectiles is just like chef's kiss. Like, listen to this. That reminds me, Saros has a really good sound design around it. I'm not going to speak on it too much, but if you play the game, you know what I'm talking about. Another thing I liked about the game is the emphasis on the eclipse. So basically what happens is whenever you're going through a specific biome, certain areas of different biomes are blocked off if you're not in the eclipse world. So there's the normal world, and you can think of the eclipse world as the upside down in like Stranger Things. Usually whenever you're going around these areas and you see a blocked off area, close by there is a place where you can go up to and switch from normal world to the eclipse world. Not only does the world change, the environment, the sky, the eclipse appears, also the enemies get more difficult to defeat. When you're under the eclipse world, the enemies do shift their attack patterns and they start shooting out yellow orbs instead of blue orbs. And these yellow orbs, if you get hit by them or if you absorb them with your shield, you'll take corruption damage instead of standard damage. And corruption damage basically doesn't allow you to heal past a certain point. And also you can see it growing on your armor. I think I'm telling you, this game and the environment they created is just really unique. They have a lot of areas in the game where you'll pull up a hologram, and if you walk through the hologram, the little pixels will go everywhere. If you shoot the hologram, the same thing. There's also different areas in the game where you'll walk into the room and you'll see a cloud of smoke pop up. The smoke will sooner or later form into like an alien or a being of some sort, and like it'll keep changing between different things. And I think just the visual portion of that is dope. But then if you shoot at that, it has an interactability with your bullets to where you shoot, the bullets pass through the smoke and leave like a hole. And sooner or later, the hole will fill back up with smoke. But just the simple fact that there's a lot of things in this environment that is interactable, it's just like, it's something you really just have to experience. It's not huge, but it makes a big difference with the immersion you have with the game. Another thing that I enjoyed and what made me really hyped to see what this game had to offer is during your first boss fight, right before you enter into the first boss biome, you get 2 options of loot canisters that you can choose from. And whenever you're going over to it, you're not used to it, but on the ground, there's grass. When you step on this red grass, it grabs your leg and it slows your character down. So it's hard to move and it's hard to jump in. This is a very subtle tutorial that they give you because they know as a player, you're going to go over to the loot containers and it teaches you, hey, there's this red grass. If you step on it, it's going to make you move slow. So whenever you go into the boss fight, the boss actually has an ability to shoot an orb out, and when it lands, it takes over that certain zone with red grass. So during the boss fight, you have to beware of the hazards that it's shooting out, and it teaches you that right beforehand without popping up on your screen and explaining too much. I thought that was very cool. Where the game drops the ball is that there are environmental hazards as you play through the game, but not to this degree. I didn't really see any later bosses using any environmental hazards to slow down or hurt the user. Besides the second boss fight where they have the little platforms on the floor that if you stand on it too long, you get hurt. That also was cool. Most of the other bosses just use the standard bullet hell approach, which I guess is fine because that's majority of what Returnal was. It would have just been nice to see more creative aspects like that first and second boss fight. Speaking of boss fights, I have one complaint here. Why are the boss fights so easy? Most of the bosses I one and done, meaning I only took one attempt to kill it. I know I don't speak for everyone, but I would like to at least struggle a little bit on the boss fights and not to the minions getting to the boss fight. I think the biomes are way more difficult than the boss fights. With that being said, I think it should be the opposite. It should be easier to get through these biomes, collect resources to get to the boss room, but once you get to the boss room, that's where it should be way more difficult. Like it should actually spike on the difficulty scale. I say this because most of the biome bosses are pretty cool. Like they have a cool design to them, a cool attack pattern, but it's just easy. And the worst part about it is that I don't get to see it often because I beat it in one attempt. Like the coolest part, the most cinematic scenes, all this stuff, I saw it only one time. Meanwhile, to get to this boss fight, I'm fighting the same generic enemies inside of a biome over and over and over again. I think that's a fourth reason on why it took me so long to beat this game. At one point, I died like, let's say 7 times, I'm guessing at this point, to a specific biome. But keep in mind, these biomes take probably like 20 minutes to fully go through, and each attempt that I had, I got close to the very end. And it was just getting boring because these enemies are just the same. Speaking of boring, just a side note, yo, what the fuck is up with these slow walking hotel scenes? That shit gotta go. Just put the shit in a cutscene. I would rather just watch than push my stick forward. Okay, pause. It was basically equivalent to Returnal walking through her house and finding bullshit on the floor. Going back to talking about dying a lot in the biomes, I personally think it may be a mental thing because if I were dying that many times to the boss room, I would have been perfectly fine. I would have been hyped to go back because of the cinematic nature of a boss fight. Another feature they added to this game that wasn't in Returnal is overdrive. Now, overdrive is essentially just your big ultimate. You jump up in the air, time kind of freezes, goes in slow-mo, and you shoot out a big ass orb that like does AoE damage. Pretty cool. You added another feature similar to power and you made it a better game. Another feature they added alongside the overdrive is the second chance. Me personally, oh my gosh, this also reminds me about the auto aim. Okay, wait, I gotta stay on topic. The second chance, at first I didn't like. I still kind of don't like it. The game didn't really need it, but it's kind of like one of those tools where, oh, thanks, I appreciate that. You know what I mean? Like, if I die and I get a second chance, like I can't really be too mad about that, but it does kind of lessen the difficulty. Like I think if I didn't have a second chance, some of those boss fights may have been a little bit more difficult. The other thing that I was going to complain about, as you heard, was the auto aim. Now, Returnal did not have auto aim. You actually have to aim where you want to shoot. This game, however, they give you kind of like a radius around your crosshair on where your bullets will auto target to wherever the enemies are. At first, I hated auto aim. I thought it was the dumbest shit ever. And then I discovered they had guns in the game that didn't have the auto aim. And I was hella hyped to use those. I was like, okay, bet I can actually use my skill. And instead of using the auto aim, it should give me more damage. I was wrong. Whenever I used those guns without auto aim, I thought that shit was ass. And it was the dumbest shit ever. And I mainly thought that way because without auto aim, the damage of the gun should have been significantly better. But it didn't feel like it was. So now I'm playing the game harder for no reason. There's way more moving parts. There's more enemies on screen at a time than there were in Returnal. So I understand them adding auto aim. I just wish they would have approached it differently. I know a lot of people who are upset at me for saying earlier that the game was too easy and they needed to up the difficulty are probably now looking at me sideways like, but there's a gun that you forcibly have to aim and it makes the game harder. But that's just a disingenuous argument. Like, yeah, you're not wrong, but like that's like asking me to play Elden Ring with just my fist because I think the game's easy. Like, no, I shouldn't have to like nerf myself to enjoy an experience. If you thought that last comment was a bad take, you're not going to enjoy the next one. These next two features that I'm going to mention, in my personal opinion, breaks the integrity of the game's difficulty. And this very well may just be me, but it's one of my pet peeves in gaming. If there's a single player experience, I would like to be able to conversate with other people who also enjoy the game and talk about it. However, with these two features, it kind of breaks the integrity of something you thought was easy, I may have thought was difficult, and something I thought was easy, you may have thought it was difficult. I think the first feature is worse than the second, but the first one is the Carcosian modifiers. Lord have mercy, I hope I said that right. From now on, I'm just calling it modifiers, like fuck that. This is yet another feature that was added to Saros that wasn't in Returnal, and I think the feature is cool, but it should have stayed in like a new game plus mode. The modifiers allow you to be able to buff or nerf yourself whenever you go into a biome. You can make it to where you do more damage to enemies, but you take more corruption damage. It's like a yin and yang. You have to do some good and some bad, but I think that overall, the positives outweigh the negative. I think on the first playthrough, you shouldn't have access to modifiers to up or nerf the difficulty. Instead, everyone should have like a static value that they go in at. And this is a prime example why. Towards the end of the game, I started using the modifier that allows me to be able to dash through red orbs. On paper, that doesn't sound like much, but at the end of the game, it only took me like 3 attempts to kill the last boss. And it's because I could dash through all the orbs, and I didn't have to worry about parrying or anything like that. Speaking of the final orb that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, red orbs, you cannot dash, nor can you block them. The only thing you can do is parry them by punching them at a perfect time, or completely dodging them altogether. But with these modifiers, it allows you to dash through the orbs, so you don't even have to worry about avoiding or parrying. Parrying red orbs is also another feature that was added into Saros that wasn't in Returnal, and it's cool. To be honest, this second feature isn't as bad as the first, but it can help a certain type of gamer who likes to grind in a level and just build up resources. If you're that type of gamer, I'm sorry, but like I said, it's not as bad as the first feature. It's called Lucenite. I personally, for my roguelikes, do not like if I go into the world, I could level up by dying and bringing back coin to upgrade my character to then go into a world that I wasn't able to beat before, but now that I'm upgraded, I can beat now. I don't like that replay loop. That's my biggest issue that I had with Elden Ring, is that me saying I struggled with this boss is not the same thing as you saying I beat this boss in one go, because we both are playing on a different scale. You could have farmed for resources, got your character hella buffed out, and went into each boss fight and just whooped their ass. Meanwhile, on the contrary, someone else could have just gone through the game normally, got to each boss fight and killed it without farming. But then they got to a specific boss where the difficulty spike hit, and they lost a shit ton until they got enough resources to buff their character to then beat that boss. The only thing I can say about this skill tree, and the reason why this feature isn't as bad as the last, is because they have certain thresholds where you have to beat a boss in order to push past. So the skill tree will go up to, like, let's say level 5. Once you hit level 5, you're capped out until you beat that boss for that biome. It doesn't matter how much you farmed, how many resources you have to beat a boss to push past to get higher in the skill tree. Another thing is that skill tree was just way too big. Like, there was just so much going on in that skill tree. It feels like you'll never be able to complete the skill tree. Look, the way I see it is no game is perfect, and Saros has a lot of things that's going for it. It's gonna be pretty difficult to slap a rating on this game, mainly because I gave Spider-Man an 8.5, and that was kinda out of anger that there were so many bugs in it. From my knowledge of what I'm thinking of right now, I don't recall any bugs in this game. Don't quote me on that. And it's very weird to give this game a lower score than a game that had so many. Also, before this game came out, I thought Returnal was the best game on PS5. I haven't given Returnal a score yet, but I know this score would be lower than it. And it makes this score really weird because I do think that this game is an upgrade from Returnal, but yet it's still going lower on my scale. So with that disclaimer, I would give this game a solid 8 out of 10. Look, it's a good game. It has a lot of good features on it. It missed the ball in a couple areas, and I do think that it's on the easier side. At one point, I thought it was harder than Returnal, but I don't know if I could stand on that anymore. I would recommend people play this game, but I wouldn't champion it like I did for Returnal. Even though, if you were to ask me, should I play Returnal or Saros, I would still pick Saros, but like, it's weird. I'm telling you, it's weird. I'm starting to understand how Game 1 could be better than Game 2, but Game 2 still get a better rating. I know what you're probably thinking, that sounds dumb as hell, but I'm telling you, it's all about timing. Returnal came out at the perfect time during the early age of PS5, and it was also using the new features that the DualSense had to offer that other games exclusive were not using, and they're still not using it today. Those adaptive triggers and being able to determine what weapon you're firing depending on how far you're pushing down, yo, that shit is fire. This will conclude my review, but before I end the video, I do want to say a slight spoiler. It's not to the story, it's nothing crazy. Personally, I wouldn't think of it that much as a spoiler, but I would have preferred to find it on my own. It's something better to find on your own, but most people I don't think are going to find it in their playthrough. So if you want to play the game vanilla with no information, I appreciate the view. Like, comment, subscribe if you appreciate the content. And come back to the video afterwards to see what I'm talking about after you beat the game. One of the coolest things that I stumbled upon in this game is, you know how like they're always saying don't stare at the stun and stuff. So there was a point in the game where I found a pistol that is reliant on how fast you can pull the trigger, and I was testing out how fast I could pull the trigger and not over click and jam my gun. So I was looking at the eclipse while clicking this button multiple times, and slowly but surely the game zoomed into the eclipse as if I was getting possessed by it. Scared the shit out of me a little bit, not gonna lie, because I didn't want to stare at it and die. But it was such a cool thing to experience without knowing that that was going to happen. If you want to experience it, go back in game, stare at the sun, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Thanks again for the view. I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.